let us talk a little bit before we get into our keynote. Just a couple quick housekeeping announcements, and I'll do some after too. This question came in yesterday quite often. So I just wanted to mention that recordings, people are asking, are we recording the sessions? So we are recording the keynotes like today, and we're recording the panels and any interviews that we do. But for the trainings themselves, we're not recording them. And part of the reason is that we are, as you know, because you're sitting through the classes, we are working with some of the world's leading experts in their field who do this for a living. They perform trainings outside of HHC. It's how a lot of them make their money is by doing this. So we're not recording these and then allowing them to be put online after. So if you want to sit through their trainings, you got to come in and sit through them. So that's just part of our contract that we're not recording those trainings. So if you can ask if this is not clear, but we just won't be doing that. And I wanted to thank everyone again for the amazing feedback that we had throughout the night. I just can't say enough about the community boards, all of you communicating with that, the awesome quotes and things like that. Yesterday was a truly phenomenal day. Looking forward to today. And to kick it off, I actually have a good friend of mine here, Drew Rose. I think I said this yesterday, but I've been a fan of Living Security ever since I met them, and we start using them in our own company here at Social Engineer because of what they do and how they do it. So Living Security has been founded in 2017, and it has a very unique view on how to get your people in line with the best security awareness practices. You should definitely check them out. If you're here for the next 2 days, their people are hanging out. Just check them out in the community boards. You can ping them through the attendees list and ask them about what they do and talk to them about their services. It's well worth it. I'm telling you, you won't be disappointed. But with me this morning is Drew Rose, as I mentioned. He's the CSO and co-founder of Living Security. He's helped the creative master. He is the creative mastermind of Living Security, combining his experience developing security programs and his love of game design to expertly craft immersive products. And if you don't know what that means, I mean it. You should go try the escape rooms at night and you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. He seeks to engage the end users and create excitement with his educational experiences and measurable outcomes. But Drew's also a CISSP with a bachelor's of science in cybersecurity, and he spent years building and optimizing security programs in the public and private sectors while serving in the military. Drew learned effective strategies for fighting cybercrime and earned a top-level security rating with the U.S. government. At Living Security, Drew applies his in-depth knowledge to reducing enterprise and personal risk by designing science-based collaborative security awareness programs. And I really want you to focus on that last part because they're not just fun, they're based on actual science that works to get your people involved. And this morning, really interesting topic. It's titled, "What if you're measuring the wrong thing?" Really fascinating question. Phishing reports have become the standard for measuring security awareness, and yet we don't see breaches stopping, do we? They keep happening day after day. Something must be broken. Knowing how to recognize a phishing attempt is just a tiny part of creating a security-focused culture and protecting your business from attacks. And Drew is here to talk to us about that. Thank you for joining us, Drew, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Chris. It was around this time last year, right? We were in Orlando having a blast. One of the last conferences that we were attending. And it was definitely memorable for us. So thanks for having us back this year to help bring something great to the Human Hacking Conference. I know there's been a lot of great content already. So let's dive into it. Like Chris had mentioned, my name is Drew Rose. I'm one of the founders, along with my wife, of Living Security. We've been at this for about 3.5, going on 4 years now. Don't need to get too much into my background. This is going to be a really fun session. We're going to talk about dating apps, military training, flies in urinals, a bit of Spider-Man, and of course, phishing. There are some general assumptions that I will make during this talk. There are things you may be doing in terms of your human risk management maturity. There may be some things that seem so off the wall that you might think I'm crazy. My ask is that you take what you want and you leave the rest. Keep your ears open as I will be dropping tactical opportunities throughout my talk. So I really hope you enjoy this. So let's move into the intro. Why are we here? Here are the three main functions that we're going to be covering today. Number one, you're probably measuring friendly fishing the wrong way. Number two is you might be thinking friendly fishing is going to just teach people not to click, right? And oops, let's see, slides. That would be helpful.
I was just going to interrupt you, so I'm glad you
There
got
we
it.
go. Number 1, 2, and 3, right? You're probably measuring friendly fishing the wrong way. You might be thinking friendly fishing is going to just teach people not to click, and you're lacking the so what in every fish that you send. And just to make sure I don't miss it, because you missed the first slide, I got to make sure that you see the fam down there with the kids in the cornfield. That's very important to me. So now that you've seen that, let's move on. All right, so the pitch. Here's Jenny. Jenny is a single girl, and like most, she is very interested in dating. And she is wanting to get out there in the market. You know, everyone's getting vaccinated. People are starting to get out there and start to date more. And she's really eager to pick things up where they left off over a year ago. So what does Jenny do? Well, she hits up the different apps, right? Tinder, Bumble, Match.com, you name it, she's on it, or she's at least tried it in the past. And these apps are great, right? And they have a little bit of a different flavor to them on how they operate and how they work. But she hasn't had too much success, right? Because she's still in the market. So she's ready to try something new. So Jenny finds this new app called One Pick. Their slogan is "Find your match, one pick at a time." She's like, "Man, this sounds great. I just want one." So this really aligns to what my goals are with dating. I want to find that one person, and I want to be with that one person. So she's really excited about what this app is all about. And she goes to dive in really with not a lot of expectations. But here's the catch. The difference between One Pick and the other apps in the market is you actually only get to pick one of the match's attributes before making a decision of whether you want to go on a date with them. So here's a potential match. Everything is covered up. You know, the age is under there, their name, their picture, their location, how far away they are from you, their hobbies and interests. But like the app name says, you only get to pick one before moving on to that first date. So in this first round, she picks number 6. And oh, wow, what do we learn? Or number 5, excuse me. What do we learn? Okay, this person is 25 years old. And that's all we know. This person is 20. Is it a girl? Is it a boy? Doesn't matter. Where are they located? Are they in Australia? Are they in California? There's a lots of pieces of information that would make this a very hard challenge for her to decide if this is somebody that she would want to date. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so here we have another selection. Again, all the really important information, it's there. You just don't get to see it, right? Because you only get one pick. And so Jenny picks number 1. She's like, well, maybe I can just make that decision. We'll call it the cover of the book. Let's just pick the face, and maybe this is the person that I want. Well, that's great. And this may be the person for her. But again, you know, what if she doesn't have similar interests? What if she is halfway around the world? What if she is not in the same age bracket that she's looking for? Again, for Jenny, like, she's probably starting to get very frustrated now, right? Like, hey, I can't make sense of this with only this one piece of information. This is hard. And just, again, doesn't make sense. So she tries one more time. She's like, let me just give this a shot. So we have this last one. Okay, this person likes skiing over snowboarding. Sunday fun days over. I don't know what's under that box down there. Again, not sure where they're located. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe this is all long distance. So maybe that's not important to Jenny. And so she wings this one. Instead of worrying about location or age or what they look like, their looks, she goes with number 8, that big black text box at the bottom. Peanut butter over jelly, though they still go together pretty well. That was useless. I don't think I could date somebody knowing that they like peanut butter more than jelly. So I think you're getting the idea. At least I hope you are. This isn't an effective way to date. Maybe it could be fun once or twice, but I think there's going to be a lot of mismatch in the outcome of using one pick as a dating app. So why is this the only human risk we care about? Did they click? Right? It shouldn't be. It can't be. But in most organizations that I talk to, it is. And for me, this was fine 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even a couple years ago, but we all in our programs are looking for ways to mature. And when we think about metrics and analytics, this is how we need to do it, right? We need to think beyond just phishing simulation metrics. Did they click or not? So why do we phish? We'll start at the genesis here. We'll actually get into a little bit about where phishing came from. Number one, it makes sense, right? We're all rational people, I believe, in this room. It just makes sense, and it always has. Phishing is 70 times more. There's 70 times more phishing sites than malware sites. This hasn't always been the case. I think just 5 years ago, there was double the amount of malware sites over phishing. But as phishing has continued to be effective, even with all the training and all the phishing simulations, a lot of the cyber criminals in the world are continuing to exploit. 1/4 of breaches involved phishing, right? That's 25%. That's a huge number. 25% of public breaches were caused by initially somebody clicking on a malicious email, whether that dropped a payload or brought them to a website that captured their credentials. 25%. And just last year, almost 3/4 of organizations in the United States experienced a successful phishing attack, right? So it's effective. It works. Nobody is saying that phishing as an attack vector doesn't work. We all know it's a problem, right? Number two, it's easy, right? If I could spend the rest of this demo and I could set up a phishing simulator, open source, and I could phish every single one of you in this room, right? It's that easy. It's not challenging to do. There's open source tools. There's free samples of tools online. You could pay a couple dollars to get something that has a little bit more features. It's insanely easy to do. You have GoFish, you have Lucy, you have OpenFish, you have Metasploit, you have this, the security, social engineering tool set. Like it's just simple, right? So number one, it's simple for us, the good guys, doing the simulation exercises. But obviously it's equally as easy for the bad guys, for the cyber criminals, leveraging phishing for their attacks. And number three, the board cares. This is something simple and easy for the board of directors of organizations to understand in a chart format. And when it comes to cybersecurity, we can't get beyond a chart. It just becomes too complex or technical, and then eyes start to glaze over. So we as cybersecurity practitioners have made it very simple for the board to understand our current human risk capacity, right? Like how we are doing based upon this one simple, easy to measure metric known as the simulated phish, right? The board of directors and the executive leadership needs to engage in this critical conversation. It is the board's responsibility to make sure that the executive team has a plan and is prepared and is preparing the whole organization for the eventuality of the attack. Sorry, I just lost my screen. Just give me 1 second. Awesome. Let's catch back up to where we were. Perfect. Back to where we were. Are we good, Chris? Can y'all see me in the Wova app?
Yeah, you're good for me. You guys give us a thumbs up on the
Okay.
side if you, okay. Yeah, we
Perfect.
got
Thank you.
tons of
So
thumbs
many
up. We can all
hands
see
going
it.
up. Appreciate the raised hands. So yeah, so it is the board's responsibility to make sure that the organization is doing what it's supposed to do to reduce risk, right? And if you only tell the board that the only metric that's feasible around human risk is a phishing simulation, that's what they're going to expect. And they're going to expect to see change, reduction of risk as you continue to invest your time and your energy into those phishing simulations. But there's definitely more. And what we're seeing is more boards are creating and asking for an individual member to have cybersecurity experience to sit on the board. So we're going from cybersecurity being part of risk, the risk committee, to cybersecurity having its own board level committee, to board of directors saying we need somebody with a cybersecurity background sitting on the board to present that view and that risk to the organization and to be able to hold the organization accountable to reducing risk and effective losses by these breaches. And the last part is we've always done it this way. I mean, if anybody is new in the industry in the last 2 to 3 years, and you're working for a decent sized organization, you probably inherited a phishing simulation program. You probably inherited the way that you're reporting those metrics to the executives and to the board of directors, right? And we all know, if anybody's in audit, that once something is established, man, it's really hard to change the opinion of the auditors or the executives, or to train them to think about risk beyond simulated phishing metrics. And it becomes a challenge. But as the program owners, within human risk, most of the people on this call probably fall into, it's our job to keep doing more, trying better, taking different approaches, because we have a large impact with what we do in terms of, reducing risk. So don't get me wrong. Like, this chart that you see over here, this is great, right? Like, you enter into a brand new organization that's never seen phishing before. Maybe 20 to 25% of that organization has been part of phishing simulations and other past companies that they've worked for. Maybe the other 75 this is their first time ever seeing it. In the initial couple months, the initial couple fishes, maybe it's looking like 30 to 40% of the people are falling victim to those simulated emails. And over time, that number is going down further and further and further, which is expected and is good. And this is necessary. This conversation that we're having today is not about simulated phishing emails aren't a proper tool within your program. But what happens after 12 months? What happens when you get to, the 3 to 4% click rate industry average that you saw before, and you're kind of hovering around this 2.5%? Delivering this to the board, like this chart, is great. As a board of director, I look at this chart and I'm like, I'm happy. Like, let's keep getting it closer to zero, right? Like, that's awesome. This is really easy for them to understand. A lot of how boards specifically operate is seeing charts like this when it comes to operating expenses, revenue, profit margins, losses. All these things make sense. But phishing is not the same, right? Like, what happens when, as a simulated phishing program administrator, I game the system, right? And we all know what that means. The previous charts are based on the general assumption that learning and behavior change is linear. It's not. Decision making is not binary, and humans aren't computers. I think a lot of people in the industry would like to believe that if we just told an end user one thing, they're going to receive that change forever. Think about that. That's not the way we operate in our personal life. It's not the way we operate as parents or spouses. It's not how we operate in a business. If I go to my computer and I say, run this program at start, it's going to do that forever, right? That's the way computers are supposed to operate. So I can make the charts in the previous slide. Like as a program owner on simulated phishing, I can make it look like this. I can make such obvious phishing emails that nobody's going to click on it. I can make a phishing simulation email that says phishing simulation email. Like there's really no boundaries. There's no controls in place when it comes to continuing to try to reduce your click rate as an organization, right? So when I talk about gaming the system, I mean, this is what it should look like. Like this would be good. I'd be pleased to see that, right? Like the goal isn't to make end users perfect in their decision making, but it's to continue to drive progress through the simulated emails and by giving them harder campaigns, and then easy campaigns, and then really hard campaigns that are, that really hit home during a certain time of the year or during a phase of business, right? Because this is not how the cyber criminals operate, right? Cyber criminals are always going to look for the advantage. And as program owners, we have to think similarly, which we probably do. But like, how do you send this to the board? Immediately they're like, oh man, John, you're doing a really bad job reducing your click rate. Maybe John, you don't belong here because you're not driving this chart to zero, right? But that's not fair, right? That's not a fair assessment. Like if we want to continue to drive progress and we want to make things more difficult and we want people to understand the risks, right? Because the idea here is you're going to have a group of users that are never going to fall for an easy one, never going to fall for a medium one, maybe in a hard phishing simulation email. You really need to make it very challenging for them to get the idea, right? Because we want to make sure that is sticking point of like what's at risk, right? Like make it hit home. So some examples. I call this an easy one. Your password expires. Maybe we're an American-based company and this is not an American calendar time company domain. I mean, it's very clear. This is not this is a phishing email. Maybe this one is a little bit harder, right? Maybe we, as an organization, we just got Slack. And so this is something that could pique my interest. It's like, oh, we just rolled Slack out 2 months ago. I wonder if this has something to do with it. I should check it out. This looks like a security problem. Something easy here. Starbucks UK. I don't think Starbucks UK changed their name from Starbucks to Starbucks. So maybe this is easy. Maybe this one's hard. Oh man, I didn't know I had a meeting right now. I don't know. Oh shoot, John's waiting. I know John. John, we met last week and I'm working on a deal with John. Why is he in my meeting room right now? I should jump on and see what John needs. Like this is something that's definitely happened to me where someone's joined a meeting 3 days early because they're testing. I don't know why actually they do that, but it's happened 5 or 6 times where someone's joined in one of my meeting rooms 5 or 6 times ahead of the day. And I get a notice, and in the startup world, you always be closing, right? That's kind of my motto. So if a prospect is in my Zoom meeting room, I need to act. Like maybe they can't meet in 3 days. I start getting that FOMO, right? That like, oh no, what if they can't meet? I need to meet them now and they're not going to close a deal. And what if they're angry that I'm not there and they expect me to be there, right? Like I need to get there. Like that's why computers aren't making decisions, right? This is why people fall for phishing emails. But maybe my assessment, easy, hard, of these last 4 samples doesn't align with yours. Maybe you look at all 4 of them and say, no, these were all easy, Drew. Like you're nuts. Like nobody would fall for these. I wouldn't fall for these. I'm way better than that. But maybe your mother thinks they're all hard and she's going to fall for all of them, right? That's kind of the perspective there as well. But I know in some of these training courses you're doing with Chris and his team that he's put together, like if I spent 10 minutes on the phone with you, I could get you to fall for any phishing email I wanted to. Like if you're a target, if you're a high value target, if you have access to sensitive critical data and me spending 10 minutes on the phone is worth the effort, right? Like my return on investment, 10 minutes cost me so much dollars. And my return on investment is that now I can phish you and get access to your account or your computer. Like I'm going to do that. Right. So that's how we have to think about this. And again, like tying it back to our conversation here, like this is good, right? Making them easy, making them hard, taking different approaches. This is what you should be doing from a simulated phishing program. And I don't want to spend too much time here because this is, very rational stuff. It's like, how do we take what we're doing and present it in a way from a metric perspective, in a way that makes more sense? So really the question that I have is, why do we care just about phishing, right? Like if threats exist outside email, you can raise your hand if you believe they do. And 3/4 of breaches are caused by something other than phishing. It sounds like we should care more about these other vectors. And here are some other human behavior problems that we see in organizations that can cause breaches or incidents. Sharing passwords, tailgating, maybe not tailgating anymore. I don't think that's much of a problem anymore, but I'm sure everybody being at home has opened up a slew of physical security issues that we don't want to even touch right now. Credential stuffing, drive-by downloads, going to malicious websites, losing devices. Like these are all behavioral problems that cause incidents. So let's take metrics to the next level. What's something that I believed in, that I started doing in my previous organization before starting Living Security, was trying to correlate behavioral data across platforms. What does that mean? All right, well, you have data that exists in your different security technology stacks, right? Like email security, your email security gateway, your web security product, your DLP. They're not only just protecting, but they're identifying these different behaviors that are not acceptable, that are against policy, or that could increase the risk of the organization. And so taking those different key data points and correlating them against other similar data points, maybe in different applications, we can start zeroing in on the people that are doing these risky behaviors in very specific categories. Proofpoint has a really cool tool called Targeted Attack Protection, TAP, which if a 0-day gets through their filter, links are rewritten regardless, right? And then if that email is found to be a 0-day, an hour, 2 hours later, once it gets sandboxed, Proofpoint can go back and say, hey, so-and-so user 1, 2, and 3 all clicked on this email. This is a problem. All right, wow. So we have real life data from our email security gateway. Let's correlate that with the the simulated emails. Let's do a quick VLOOKUP. Are there people falling for simulated emails and phishing emails, real phishing emails? Well, now we have a very good targeted group to get out there and say, hey, these are people that are really, really at risk. They're not just falling for simulated emails, they're falling for real ones. And over the last 12 months, it's happened 17 times. Endpoint security hygiene, I call this one. Here are some metrics from your endpoint systems that you can pull from to get an overall viewpoint on how people's endpoint security hygiene is. Not updating their antivirus, getting malware on their endpoint, downloading software with an unknown source, their AV is out of date, and maybe they're plugging in unauthorized media. These can be coming from 2 or 3 different systems, but these are all events. These events, I promise you, if you're in an organization that has more than 500 employees, you can get access to these events. You may have access to the events, right? Combine them, correlate them together, add a score to them, do a count, right? Download your event, correlate it against the users, put a 1 on the far right column, and then do a line graph by user and see which users have the most instances of these events, right? It could take a couple hours to do, fine. But then you're going to get a group of users that are most at risk on your endpoint. Right? Now you have a group of users you can target. You also have baselines, right? We'll talk about that in a minute. There's a couple other examples over there. I'll keep going. And so when we have these events, when we do this work, when we set this up, we have baselines, right? We can have baselines for your entire organization. We can do baselines for your, different user groups based on different attributes, like their geolocation, their job role, their title, who they report to, right? And so if you create a system where you're taking all these different events into some type of tool, like a BI tool, over time you can see changes in those baselines. You can see the deviation from those baselines for different groups that are either going positive or negative, and then you can do something about it. And then coming up with a master score, you're able to say, hey, I have all this other behavioral data beyond phishing around our human risk. And that's really what I want to start getting to as we report to the board. And so what about correlating behavioral data with qualitative data? This is something I call phishing actuality true. So this combines phishing assessments with a phishing confidence score. What that means is in this chart, you have 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each of these 4 columns represents a confidence rating, a confidence level. Meaning we asked all of these users, how confident do you feel in assessing whether an email is malicious or not? Right? This is a qualitative assessment. Someone's raising their hand saying, hey, I don't feel confident at all. I need more training. That was the answer to this number 1 column. And the answer to the number 4 column was, I will never, ever get caught. You can never catch me. I'm like a robot. I will never fall for a phishing assessment. And then this scoring, going from down up to down or whatever, is actually how they're doing on phishing assessments over time. So the lower you are down here, the worse you're doing in phishing assessments. The higher you are up here, the better you're doing. So when we start thinking about training and simulations and targeting groups of users, kind of taking it to the next step, we have some really interesting data here. We have number 1, a group of users that are not confident and are not doing well. Well, these people are going to be have open arms to wanting more training or awareness conversations. Then we have another group over here, call them the overconfident individuals, right? These are probably your IT and software developers. These are the people that are saying that they're never going to get caught. And the fact is they get caught a bunch. So you may have to bring cookies to a lunch and learn and entice them to participate. But again, now you have a group of users that you can go out and perform interventions on and then track the results going forward instead of more of this pray and spray approach that we're used to doing. So continuing into the train, so we're starting to uncover some different and new things we can do around metrics. So the second problem is that I've heard that we have phishing simulations, we don't need training. And that just hurts. That just hurts me to my core because number 1, you can't train without, you can't train through a test. So as earlier mentioned, I was in the military. I was enlisted, so I went through the whole basic training deal. And you get a rifle and you learn how to shoot and you do all these things, right? And so you don't just take that gun with bullets in it and go start knocking in doors over in Afghanistan or Iraq. There's this entire training process to build up the sense memory, the repetition to be able to perform in the field under heavy emotional stress. You start in the classroom, like any good training. You learn about shooting, you learn about situations, you learn about your weapon. You learn how to put together your weapon, all the pieces, the ins and outs of what all these different things mean. It's about safety too, as well as understanding the tools that you're using. Then you have your drill sergeant. He's literally on top of you as you first fire to make sure you don't kill somebody, helping you to line up the sights, helping you to aim downfield, helping you how to breathe, where to put your arms, where to rest your weight. Then you get an opportunity to start shooting. You get out there, you start putting the repetition down, right? You're going through hundreds of rounds in basic training, getting better and better and better. At some point, you get out of the prone and into the kneeling position. Then you graduate into the standing position. At some point, you get to throw grenades, right? Because that's fun. But again, here's a drill sergeant in the bunker with you, because if you screw up, that's a problem, right? That's risk. The drill sergeant is risk avoidance. Right? If you drop the wrong part, he helps you get it out of there. And then you practice, right? So you train, now you're practicing. So if you guys are not familiar with weapons, those little yellow and red things at the end of the weapon are, they would stop a bullet from being fired if somebody accidentally had a round in their weapon. So they're just a safety tool, right? This is probably somewhere looks like Michigan, maybe doing some training, kicking indoors. Now we've done the training, we've done the repetition. Now let's get overseas and let's get after it, right? Let's do it. We're kicking indoors, we're throwing in grenades, we're getting the stockpiles, we're doing a good job, right? And that takes time, right? That training is really important to do. And let's talk about it, right? Most social engineering attacks prey on our instinctive reactions to situations, not allowing us to slow down and move the decision to the neocortex, which is the rational part of our brain, right? So when we are in a situation, you've probably heard the phrase fight, flight, or freeze. That's happening in this reptilian brain down here in the middle. That's like the quick emotional reaction to a situation that's of high emotions, right? But the idea is we want to transition decision-making from the amygdala, the reptilian brain, to the neocortex, where we can think about it. So the more repetitions we get during an emotional exercise like firefight or like phishing emails, the better we get at taking our emotions out of the picture and responding to them. One part of that is the positive reinforcement, which we'll talk about a little bit. When I built a phishing program for an organization about 3,500 employees with high turnover, I noticed on average that after conducting the phishing assessment, new employees would be 10% likely to fall for them, while those that have fallen for phishing assessments in the past were under 1%. But one of the key things about my program is that it was all based on positive outcomes, meaning that for new employees, I would tell them the phishing email was coming. Say, hey, next week, I'm going to phish you. It's because this is the reason why, because our organization could be at risk if you fall for them. So they know it's coming. So you give them an opportunity to be successful right out of the gate, right? And that's how you start building culture, a strong security culture, not negative, right? Because we don't want to punish them for doing something that we could all get trapped in the future for as well. Practice, training, repetition helps move from responding through fear, through like my Zoom meeting, my Zoom conversation from earlier. Fear of losing the deal could cause me to click on that Zoom link when it's not legitimate, without going through the proper steps of highlighting the URL, understanding who it's coming from, and then recognizing whether there's risk, right? So practice, training, repetition helps us move through responding to get to the neocortex to respond rationally with all those different data points faster. And that's the goal. And you can't, and what I'm getting at, you can't do that just through a simulated phishing email every quarter, right? You can't train through a test. So, but what is the actual goal, right? Behavior change, reduce risk. As an organization in human risk management, that is our fundamental goals, is behavior change to reduce risk. So what is behavior change? There's something of a surprise waiting at the bottom of the urinals in Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, as well as others. It's an etched image of a fly. At first glance, you might be forgiven for thinking it's real, but then you notice all the urinals have one, and the fly is always in the same position, just above the urinal drain and off to the left. It turns out that men in their urinal behavior cannot resist peeing on things. I feel like if I was in an audience, there'd be laughter here, but I can't tell. So I'll just pause. You guys can laugh out loud at this moment. Especially if they look, they cannot resist peeing on things, especially if it looks like they might wash it away. So urinal designers have obsessed for decades about finding a solution for this so-called splashback, right? Splashback screens, rubber floor mats, curiously shaped urinals in which the stream ricochets off concave walls into rather than out of the urinal and rib urinals. Guys are simple-minded and love to play with their urinal stream. So you put something in the toilet bowl and they'll aim at that. It could be anything, right? So Aid Kieboom, who takes the credit for the introduction of the urinal fly in Schiphol Airport in the early 1990s, though he says the idea wasn't his. It actually started, I think it was in the 60s that this idea came in the military. And so what were the results? There was a 10% savings in cleaning costs for a very marginal cost of investment to etch a fly on the porcelain urinal. And this is what we call nudge theory. This is what we are going to get into in the next several slides. So let's take a step back. And what is the behavior we are actually expecting? Well, these are the positive actions: not falling for malicious emails, setting strong passwords, not sharing passwords, not going to unsafe websites. These are the things that we don't want. So how do we get there? Well, here are some options for that behavior change. A nudge theory, which we'll talk about in a minute, culture of learning, right? By having a positive approach to our simulation programs, by saying this is success, right? This is great. You guys are doing a good job. We all know that understanding, being able to assess every phishing email is difficult and challenging. Engagement and a multifaceted approach. So from a multifaceted approach, this is part of what we do at Living Security is we have lots of different opportunities for engaging on similar subjects. So we have something called nano modules, 60-second security basics, just real quick, a little bit of comedy, understanding what these different topics are around phishing. You know, we take that into something we call phishing in real life, 10-minute long video around who the bad guys are in cyber criminal organizations and what they're after. We take it to a fictional approach, talking about phishing from a sci-fi perspective and how it can impact larger corporations that are doing bad stuff, but also including different puzzles and challenges to help people learn by doing. So in this exercise, people are actually crafting their own business email compromise. As you all have seen, Cyberscape Online, working as a team, right? Learning together in a fun and interactive environment. This is all behavioral science fundamentals that have worked in different industries for the last 50 or 60 years that we at Living Security have been adapting into the human risk side for the last 3 or 4 years, right? This is proven and effective. We had one client of ours that did an A/B test, which I love, around their phishing simulators. And they had 700 people go through Cyberscape Online. Then they phished them and they phished another 700 at random. And the group that went through Cyberscape Online were 40% less likely to click on a malicious email, right? You can't argue with facts, right? There's actual proof that these types of experiences are effective. We've created something we call Campaign in a Box, where we have memes and blog posts and text messages and DMs and emails that all relate in a fundamental way around these different topics that you can post. And really, and then we have some physical escape rooms we've done in the past. And then lunch and learns, live hacking demos, right? If you want behavior change, you have to attack it from different angles, for one person, but also for different people, right? Like different people may want to engage in this training for different reasons. What we call these intervention previews, right? Telling people they've been noticed, that we're grateful and thankful for their reporting of a phishing email or for them not falling for simulated phishing emails, right? People love the gratitude, even if it's just a kind note or an email or a Slack message telling them that you are thankful and grateful. So here's some, when we think about nudges, back to the urinal, when we think about nudges, we think about how can we apply nudges in cybersecurity? Well, the sky's the limit, right? Like really, there's some standard practices like what you see here about a password, making sure that it's so long and having a bar that turns from red to yellow to green as you make it more complex or long enough to be accepted by the system. You have websites like, Google does this, Google Chrome, that if it thinks it's identified a website as being malicious, it can, number one, it could block you. But the nudge is it can say, hey, you have to click a button to proceed. So you are accepting the risk that somebody outside of yourself said this could be a problem. And you as an end user has to say, yes, I accept that risk. I'm moving forward anyway. This was an interesting study that I just read. The results are at the bottom, but the two gentlemen did a study on these nudges in an email system. And then did some great surveys. And basically, before they clicked on a link, they had to answer this question. Like, who is this from? Choose the email address, choose if it's from a colleague. And what they found out was that 85% of the surveyed participants were more likely to be suspicious of an email when prompted with one of these prompts above. I'm not sure right now of any organizations that are doing this. We're not doing this at Living Security right now. But it seems like there's probably some fun scripting you can do in Outlook or whatnot to build this yourself. And so those are just some opportunities for nudges before we get into the last section. And these nudges can be important because, again, when we start talking about back to the metrics, you can use these nudges for tests. And then you could use data from controlled groups to, number one, prove that these nudges are effective in your organization. And then you can do before and afters, right? Because that's what we need to see. We need to see in these metrics and reportings that the interventions you're taking as a security awareness program owner, human risk manager, that the things you're doing are causing an effect, right? And so you need to, before you do any type of nudge, my recommendation would be to identify the metric that you're looking to change. Right? What is your goal to change that metric? Get all the data 3, 6, 9 months prior, so you have good baseline. Put the nudge or the intervention in place. Wait 3 months, measure again, see how you did. As a board member, that would be extremely valuable to me. Right? Because that's use real life data from security behaviors. Do something beyond phishing simulations that show you're trying to reduce risk, and then show the results. There's a scientific method to proving you're doing a good job, which I know you all are. And so last piece we'll spend a couple minutes on is the culture. Culture is extremely important to me, both as an organization, as when I was in the military, and then in my next organizations. And really, culture was part of why I started Living Security. Being in the military, we had, I'm sure there's a couple, raise your hands if you feel like volunteering, but if you guys remember the cyber challenge, I think I took the cyber challenge exercise from DISA like 9 years in a row, and it never changed. And it was the running joke, who could get through it the fastest, who could guess on the questions, and nobody ever paid attention. But then I'd be overseas and I'd have to fire contractors or demote soldiers or Marines because they're not doing the right behavior. They're putting the company, their unit at risk, right? In battlefield, right? Downrange. And I thought, man, that's a problem. There's a problem with the culture around cybersecurity. It was teaching people that not to care, to get through it as fast as possible, that we're not going to invest in awareness and training that you actually care about and want to take. But culture goes, when we talk about phishing simulators, simulation emails, culture goes another way too, right? So number one, you need every employee to be enabled to be your security champion, right? Whether they think they are or not, if they report a phishing email using your phish alarm button, they are a security champion, right? They're doing something they don't have to do because they recognize what that means for their organization. And that is why phishing reporting is a huge metric that should also be reported to the board. And so I think over the last 9 months, I believe these phishing simulation emails have really started to come into the public eye in terms of crossing the line. And that's something that I would encourage all of us, and we'll get through this in a minute, all of us to consider as we select campaigns, because this is not how you build culture, right? This is not how you create security champions. This, in fact, is how you do the opposite. This was a super interesting article. This is on a KnowBe4 site. It was one of their scams of the weeks. Phishing email uses accurate GPS data to catch speeding drivers. They posted about this. A couple days after the post, they get a message. I was just called by an InfoSec professional who told me this was his phishing test that escaped into the wild. This person did an excellent job tricking some of his employees into believing this was real, including yours truly. That's the writer, the author. And the fish got out to local police station, put it up on their website. I'm sure we all remember this one. There's a lot of these that actually came out during COVID as their mass layoffs were happening. Now, I can tell you this wasn't a KnowBe4's defense. This was not a campaign that was in their library, right? This was a custom campaign. Somebody built this. Somebody made this from scratch. This, hey, here's a bonus coming. And then here's another gentleman who who chimed in, and his was a termination email that was phishing, right? And so we want to be clear. We want to try our best, right, to select campaigns that are effective, that are hard, right? But we don't want to piss people off. And it is a fine line. Don't get me wrong. It is a fine line to walk. So Janan Budge, principal analyst at Forrester, she published a blog middle of last year, I think, as these were all starting to come out. And here are some of the questions you ask when we start talking about creating your simulated phishing campaigns. What's the potential impact of the simulations? It's called empathy, right? If you get somebody because they think they're getting Amazon Prime for free, they're, $99 they thought they were going to save, that's probably not going to leave a stain on the culture, on their culture sheet about, do they care about security? If you think they're getting a $15,000 bonus, or they're getting fired, or they're losing health benefits, those are things that I would steer clear of. Really, the idea is to respond positively to potential risks, not to be fearful or angry when you think a simulation email is coming through. Does this benefit the other humans on the other end? Am I being smug and gaming with employees, or am I genuinely trying to change behavior? Those are some questions that we can ask. So how can we do better on this part from a cultural perspective? Inform them. I mean, that was the one thing that I thought was the best way to kick off phishing simulation emails, phishing simulation program. Let them know it's happening and why, right? End users want to know the reasons why that something is happening, why they're being tested, what it means for them and their organizations. If you can tie the risk specifically back to their organization that they care and are passionate about, you're going to have a very successful job. And then let them know the results, right? This is something that it took me a very long time to do. But 3 or 4 days after a simulated campaign went out to my organizations, I'd send a company-wide email thanking them, thanking the people that solved, thanking the people that that didn't click on it, thanking the people that reported it, and being empathetic with the ones that did. And that goes an extremely long way. You need every employee to be enabled to be your security champion. Threats change on a daily basis, and cyber criminals are using increasingly sophisticated TTPs. Their goal doesn't have to be breach the CEO or the finance department. It's enough to breach any employee, then utilize their access to get valuable information, or to get the valuable data, right, to make their payday. Awesome. So we covered a lot. We covered on metrics. I hope there were some good nuggets on some things that you might be able to do in terms of reporting to your team. Make sure you're not only using the simulation, but also the reporting metrics. And then start getting creative. Start identifying other behaviors and systems that you want to track and specific interventions of training over time. And then attack those behaviors from a multifaceted approach. Videos, blogs, games, puzzles, lunch and learns, movie nights, There's countless options for you to turn to. We talked about, where training fits in to your simulated phishing program. Again, it can't stand alone. You have to use a simulated phishing email as the, trial, understanding that they're going to get real life phishing emails in their box, but you have to have options and opportunities for knowledge transfer ahead of those simulated emails. And then in the last part, culturally, let's not abuse our power, right? Like our goal, again, is to turn your end users into the best asset of your cyber defense. And we have to be intentional about the decisions we're making in our training, awareness, and phishing programs to do that. Yep. Thank you so much for the time. I think we have 5 minutes left. I don't know if Chris has any thoughts or anything you want to add.
You actually have a question.
Yeah, let's go.
There's a couple questions that came in. First of all, I just want to reassure you, there was definitely laughing during the urinal point. You know what else? It was uncomfortable laughing because I realized that I have fallen for that exact thing. And anyhow, thanks for the this uncomfortable laugh. But you do have a question. Someone asked, should we be supplanting any phishing dashboard with this information? We have both, a phishing dashboard and then one that correlates other stuff. Maybe we need to de-emphasize phishing in favor of a more holistic view. Yeah,
so we at Living Security, and again, what I was doing before the company is I created a more of a security score where I would weight the different behaviors that I was seeing and create an overall objective. And it's really, there's no right or wrong way to do it on your side. Because you may be getting metrics and it may be difficult, but assigning a score to a behavior, being able to remove the noise, and then combining them together, right, to come up with that score. And I do believe that it should start with the holistic view of all the behaviors. And then obviously the next biggest one that everyone's going to ask is going to be phishing. So that'd be the next level down, right, in terms of breaking that security score out.
The next question was, aren't holistic views of humans' risk more difficult to sell internally to a board? Seems like marrying up phishing training data, real-world phishing data, HR data could be tricky to manage. Any best practices on how to sell this?
Yeah, number one, it's extremely hard. It's a product that we're working on at Living Security that we call Unify, is able to help you do that through systems and integrations and APIs. The first question is, yes, it's difficult to sell, which is why you have to test, right? You have to take a small portion. You have to prove that it's going to work, right? Like no one's going to believe that you can change behavior unless you have access to the data and you can prove the data changes over time. So you take small chunks, take one small organization, get permission from their VP, say, hey, listen, VP, I want to spend a couple hours with your user every quarter or half a year. And it's going to be in the terms of different types of awareness. And I'd like to use you as a training group. And you can show the before and the after. And you've done that for 200 people or 100 people. And then you can go to your chief level execs and say, hey, here is my test. This is the investment in time. This was the investment in training. These were the results. And the results should show behavior change. Less visits to uncategorized websites, right? Less times saying delay on the antivirus scanner, less times clicking on even the simulated phishing emails as part of it.
And then our last question we have time for are, what are the interventions in slide 31? This guy has a really great memory and counted your slides.
They're at the bottom. Oh, here. Okay. So interventions here. So in this example, we had four different interventions. We had a phishing video deployed. We had a team-based training exercise to this group of users. And I believe we had a communication sent out to saying why this is important. So we did 3 different things at this time right here for a specific group of users that this was their data before. And after we did this interventions, we started measuring the effects afterwards, and this is what we saw.
Awesome. Well, Drew, I can't thank you enough. That was fascinating. And me personally, I loved your point. I made 2 notes in the favorite quotes. topic, which is it's called empathy. Use it, and let's not abuse our power. I think those are just two super powerful quotes to use from your speech. So thank you so much for that information.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Chris. It was a pleasure to be here.
Anyone who wants to get to know a little more about living security, definitely check out the escape room during our happy hour tonight. While you're roaming around today, please head over to the exhibitor hall, check out Innocent Lives Foundation, and hop in and see our friends Dave and Allie and give a good testimonial. You're leaving such nice comments. We'd love to see those there. Just another reminder, we won't be recording training sessions, but what can you look forward to today? Let's take a quick look. Well, you have our using nonverbal communications in a forensic setting with Joe Navarro. The vishing track for SE SIRA testing is starting. How to assess people like an FBI behavioral expert with Robin Dreek. Then this afternoon, we have psycholinguistics with Osama Kwashi. Vishing will be continuing and Robin Dreeks will be continuing. After that, there's a panel with Joe Navarro, Anna Marge, and myself all about nonverbals. And don't forget our networking tables, which are super fun, the escape room, which I've been talking about nonstop, and our jacket box games. You can check all of those out on the agenda and sign up for any one of them. And just have another great day, ladies and gentlemen, and we will see you around the conference. Thanks.